What's the password? Welcome to the Game Master Speakeasy. Brought to you by the record button.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Game Master Speakeasy. I'm one of your hosts, Cody, joined by...
And I'm Lance.
This is Lance, my good buddy, and you've found your way to the Game Master Speakeasy. Come on in. We welcome everybody. That's, I like to think that there's a little bit of Game Master in all of us, even though, you know, maybe you haven't run a game. Maybe you're just a player. That's fine. Come on in and join us. We are a RPG-themed podcast. We're just going to talk about mostly tabletop RPGs. We might touch on war games and, oh, God forbid, TCGs, but never again will we succumb to the addiction that is Magic the Gathering. Hopefully. But we are here to talk to you about our experiences in tabletop gaming, share some news with you. Today, this is the proverbial session 0. We're going to talk a little bit about ourselves and why you might even bother listening to us. Lance here has well, you go first. Let's just say how long you have been in doing this.
Well, I'm the old guy on the couch. I have been playing and or game mastering tabletop games for the better part of 25 years. I started in high school, so that gives you some idea how old I am. I've played and game mastered Shadowrun, Deadlands, more playing than game mastering, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, playing Pathfinder 2, and then little dabbles into various other games throughout various other genres over the course of that time.
And I, Cody, have also been game mastering, but compared to Lance for a relatively much shorter piece of time. However, I live for it. I wake up, and on the days that we are going to play or I'm working on tabletop games, I feel like a different person. I feel like I'm spreading my wings.
Sometimes I feel like Cody's my greatest Frankenstein monster, because for those of you who have played games and then kind of gotten shoehorned into game mastering because nobody else in the group would do it, I was the one that got Cody started on gaming, and now I rarely, if ever, have to game master because he does all the work for me and I just get to play, which is a nice luxury after spending the vast majority of that 2.5 decades being the game master.
Yes, and... you know, it's a situation where it's like, you know, I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me. But we're going to touch we'll talk more about that later. First, we're going to touch on a couple of news topics. First off, just in case you have been living under a rock, or maybe you're not living under a rock and it's just not something you have to worry about. You go with the flow and news finds you when it does. The casters of the shore, the sorcerers of the beach, if you will, have announced a new evolution of their titular product, the one and only Dungeons and Dragons. The hog's share of the gaming world is going to receive not a new edition. They've been very careful not to use the word edition, right? But they are promising that it will be backwards compatible with 5th edition, which, if you ever look at the numbers on people that are using things like Roll20, it's like something crazy. It's like 90% of it, I think, is Dungeons & Dragons or something crazy like that. And then...
so are we, for lack of a better term, just calling this 5.5?
I think that is what a lot of the internet took to immediately. There is a lot of nostalgia attached for 3.5, which neither of us have ever run, but one of my favorite pastimes is to buy systems, read the entire rulebook, and never have a chance to run it yet.
Because newer, better, well, I don't even necessarily better, but newer editions have come out that have become more popular and are now kind of more serviced.
Yeah, and we also have jobs.
Well, that too. Yeah, I don't know how many games we can concurrently run at a given point in time.
If I could run a game every day of the week, I would.
I mean, if somebody were paying me to do that, I would absolutely game master 5 days a week as a job. For
yes.
Sure.
Our primary foray into my dungeon mastering occurred when I stepped into the shoes of Marshall of a Deadlands campaign, but as a fantasy nerd, we jumped into 5th edition D&D pretty hard when I just bought the books and forced everyone to play with me. And
it didn't take much. It wasn't really that forced. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of people out there clamoring to play, and when you've got a game master that is volunteering to game master without any objection at all, you jump on that.
I was chomping at the bit. But That is something I am very much looking forward to, especially because we have made a switch in the last year to a competitor of that. A second piece of news, though, I have is, well, this is news to me, because it flew under my radar, and I know no one of our friends talked about it. It is a system, so it's news to me, so it's news, and that counts, darn it.
All right.
And that is, there is a tabletop game called Asunder, I believe. I think I have it right here. It is published by Gifted Rebels, and it is a system based kind of on the system called Shadows of the Demon Lord. Are you familiar with that one?
I'm not, no.
Okay, Shadows of the Demon Lord is a system by Rob Schwalb. That's a hard name to say. Rob Schwalb, and he is a fantastic designer for old fantasy stuff. He's a real good monster designer, but Shadows of the Demon Lord, where it's set in like a almost post-apocalyptic fantasy, really grim, dark fantasy, where the big bad evil guy has already won, and the heroes are trying to survive. It kind of uses that system, and Asunder is a primal RPG set in a world without metal. Where the characters, the PCs, the heroes of the party are using their essence, their powers to shape bugs and like plants and use it as armor and weapons.
So does it come off, is it supposed to come off as kind of a high fantasy without metal, or is it supposed to come off more as like a Far Cry Primal caveman fantasy game?
I get kind of a darker, not so dark as like, oh, it's doomsday, we're all gonna die, but a more Far Cry Primal kind of thing, but with fantasy and all sorts of crazy
and stuff
magic,
like that.
And
Okay.
if you look at the artwork, it's just kind of got this grit to it.
So like everybody's kind of a barbarian in their own right. A lot of fur clothing and spears with sharp rocks and flint and maybe giant praying mantis like scimitars and things like that.
I'll tell you what. In classic me fashion, I'm going to buy that PDF and read through it, and I'll tell you more. And then we'll run it maybe 6 months from now.
Run a segment on it.
Yeah. And then, so what else have we got? Oh, I am not a huge fan of it. I have watched some episodes. I live in fear of being labeled that I am copying Matt Mercer for my content, and such I kind of avoid watching too much of it, because if I ever copy him, I want it to just be by pure accident, so I can say, like, we both got there on our own. But for those that are huge fans of it, you might have heard of Critical Role. I don't know.
I've watched quite a few hours of Critical Role. Most of the first season for sure.
It's a show. It's a show. I think some people might have heard
I
of it.
would imagine that a lot of our core audience has probably listened to that or seen it at some point.
I know at least two of my players in my regular fantasy usual weekly RPG group are fans of it, but they have recently dropped a trailer. They had a Kickstarter, I think it was last year, where they were going to produce an animated show based on their first season, and the trailer just dropped for it. And it is filled with all sorts of references that I'm sure are very meaningful for people that have actually listened to the whole show.
I'm going to have to check out the trailer. I really enjoyed the first season. I mean, and I'm always a big fan of cartoons, so you put anything to animation and I'll watch it just for fun.
Oh, yes. For those at home, you might have gathered this, but we're nerds. But in particular...
Also true.
In particular, we are fans of animation. One of our buddies in my normal RPG group is actually a freelance animator who's done a little bit of work. And so you can picture like 2 or 3 30-year-old men sitting on a couch watching the newest animated Disney movie just because we were like, ooh, look how smooth that animation was. Ooh, look at how beautiful that water is.
I appreciate the generosity of you using 30 as your age as opposed to
That's
older,
right.
because,
I am about to be 31. And Lance, you are...
I just turned 40.
You're gonna die.
Well, we all are eventually, but yeah, I intend to at some point. Hopefully later rather than sooner, but who knows?
So, last piece of news I have is the...
You're pregnant?
No, I am not. Thank goodness. Not yet. And who knows? Maybe someday. I don't know, man. I'm just trying to figure life out as it goes along. But if I ever did have a kid, they're gonna play the heck out of tabletop games. I'm not letting them play football. That's for sure.
I can't get my kid to read through the 5e book to save his life. I keep trying. I'm like, here, just read it and play with your friends. Come on, you're gonna enjoy it. Trust me.
You know what you could do? You could bribe him, say, you can get out of your next grounding if you read through this core rulebook.
That's a good idea. He's currently grounded, actually.
Well, there you go.
Could use this to my advantage, leverage it.
To go along with the previous piece of news, where the alchemists of the Western region are producing a new version of their wonderful, which I do like it. I have a great, deep love for at least 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, because it is what has kind of launched me into the foray, this adventure, if you will. You know, what's a good word for, this long journey? Oh, adventure.
Pretty commonly used word in this industry, yeah.
Weird, that. Adventuring into game mastering, which is why we're here at this Game Master Speakeasy, is that there is a company, there is a recent Kickstarter. It launched 4 days ago. I believe they're located in the UK. It's a London, or no, not London, but it is in the UK somewhere. I don't know. Not important. What's important is that they are producing a crunchier rule set for 5th edition.
Is this just like an add-on to the existing 5e rule set, or is it designed to replace it?
It is a standalone game with its own set of 12 classes, most of which you look at the names and the artwork and you're like, oh, well, one of them's just straight up called a bard, one of them's called the rogue. And it's published using 5e's OGL, the Open Gaming License.
Okay, so they kind of try to go the Paizo route, where they take an existing form of Dungeons and Dragons and then make it their own and run with it? Is that kind of what it seems like?
Yeah, it's basically their own version of a 5.5, which coincidentally happens to be launching this Kickstarter around the same time that the progenitors themselves, well, not TSR, but the progenitors themselves are launching their version, which will be backwards compatible with 5e. This competitor has gotten a lot of this competitor I will name drop is EN Publishing, the people who started the Ennies, which is the annual awards for the tabletop gaming.
Oh, okay.
It's like the closest thing we got to the Oscars.
Gotcha.
So this same publisher that started the Ennies, I believe, EN Publishing, is the ones behind Level Up Advanced 5th Edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay. So have they kind of talked at all about what they're going to put in this system? Like what kind of things? I mean, is this... Because, like, your homebrew, for example, before we switched over to Pathfinder, when we were really kind of elbow deep in what we were doing with 5e, you had done a lot of homebrew stuff, and you had done a lot of third-party stuff that we'd added to the campaign to kind of add depth and things like that. New rule sets that kind of filled in some of the gaps. Because 5e is a beautiful system for what it is.
It really
is designed for simplicity. You can take somebody of almost any age, and you can put them on a table with a 5e rule set and a game master who's got a working knowledge of it and play it. I did. I mean, I took my kid and my wife, and we ran just a simple, one-shot one night just because I wanted to introduce my kid to the game. He absolutely loved it, but like I said, the effort for him for reading the actual book has become a bit of a pain point for me. But I mean, and you can do that. I mean, that's one of the beauty parts, I think, of 5e as opposed to games like Pathfinder that are a little more complex, is that the cost of entry to 5e psychologically, mentally, is a lot less than most other game systems. So I guess I kind of got off on a little rant, but back to that. So are they talking about the things that they're changing to make it crunchier?
My brief research has not revealed exact mechanics, but the things that they are advertising are more advanced or complex mechanics. Well, actually, it's I believe the way they worded it was depth, not complexity.
Okay.
So it's a deeper system, not to confuse you. So they're trying to make it intuitive. Obviously, you want your game to be intuitive, so they want it to have more depth, and they want to have more choice. So here, let's play a game. Pathfinder or Level Up Advanced 5th Edition. More depth, more character choice that matters, things like that. Mm-hmm. A lot of the things they tout kind of feel like the reasons that we switched to Pathfinder.
Okay.
You've got certain things in the game that are more, well, for me, personally satisfying. Like you said, 5th edition is wonderful, but I love a lot of crunch.
Oh, yeah.
My favorite chocolate bar is a crunch bar. Is the crunch bar. I love a good crunch bar. I want crunch in my game. I don't want it to be so crunchy that everyone else is having no fun, though. But if you'll recall when We'll touch on this in our open segment, because we're going to talk about a little small anecdotes about our personal experiences, how we got into this hobby, and in it I will talk about an example of just how much I like to do homework for my own player characters. Whereas, some people just want to show up and play, and that is perfectly acceptable because we're all just here to have fun with our friends.
Absolutely.
So before we get into what we have done this week here at the GM Speakeasy, you want to tell us what we're drinking?
As the name of the show would imply, this is the Game Master Speakeasy, and because it is the Game Master Speakeasy, we happen to be enjoying a few adult beverages during the course of this thing. So each episode, we might give you a little talk about what we're drinking, kind of a review of the product. We are drinking a Pretzel Stout.
Yes, it is chocolatey and infused with peanut butter and pretzels, and it is...
It tastes exactly like what you would think a Pretzel Stout would taste like. If you're familiar with beer stout specifically, it's definitely chocolatey, it's definitely pretzely, and there's a little bit of salt on the back end, kind of the pretzel salt vibe.
Oh, yeah, I actually get a hint of that. And I want to state that while we are reviewing such a wonderful product, we do not condone underage drinking. Please drink responsibly. All right, Lance, what'd you do this week that's tabletop related? What'd you do this week that's tabletop related?
I would think you would know. You were there. We went ahead and did a kind of a first run test of the Lancer system, actually.
For those who don't know, Lancer is an RPG that you can play to express your passionate burning love of giant metal robots doing battle with one another and anime-style narratives in between.
And, I mean, who doesn't like giant metal robots beating the tar out of each other?
I literally can't stop thinking about it. I was at work standing dead, doing nothing at work, because I have two jobs. One of them is customer service, and with no one present, I just stand there and think about tabletop stuff, usually. And I was standing there planning encounters, coming up with a mechanic to help. One of my biggest pitfalls is I get a new system and I think I need to change it immediately instead of trying to just run it raw. But I do think it is a mechanic that will help reinforce the mercenary style of play. What else, though? You do anything mini related?
I've been doing a lot of painting, a lot of Norse-style minis. I've got 3 ships that I got. The Loot Studios did an STL file dump. You could buy out the entire collection. There's 80-some minis, all kind of based on Norse mythology. They were for the Journey to Valhalla. I think that's an expansion for 5e, or a book for 5e, and I bought all those up, and I printed out 3 complete long ships and a number of little Viking dudes to paint.
Have you painted the one with the leaf sail yet?
No, I've started the hull of that thing. I've gotten most of that done, but not entirely.
Have you decided what color you're going to do the leaf? I think you should do the fall.
I think I'm going to do kind of a fall color. For those that don't know, if you haven't seen this particular set of STLs, there's 3 different ships involved, and one of them looks like a more typical Viking longship, what you would expect if you've seen the show Vikings, or if you're at all familiar with any Norse cultural thing. It's very traditional. And then one of the ships, it really looks like what you would imagine an elfish longboat looks like. The sail itself is textured like a leaf.
It's a giant leaf!
It's a giant leaf. So when we talked about the coloring of it, when I originally printed it out, I'd mentioned that I'd probably try to use more fall colors, bright colors, something like that, to give it a little panache, because, the rest of the boat's going to be like a wood brown and stuff like that. And then the third ship, I kind of really equate it to what I would imagine Jotun would sail in. It's very brutal looking. There's a mammoth skull up on the top of the sail. There's a big ice prow on the front to cut through frozen area. It's kind of a neat thing, but...
Hey, you know what I would say if I was a villager that elven ship was going to come attack my village?
Oh God, what?
Leave us alone.
Oh no. We even got a look from our producer on that one. Wow.
All right, so let's see. What did I do this week? Like I said,
you
before,
Game Mastered Lancer.
Well, yeah, Game Mastered Lancer. That was fun. My experience with that was, I really like the system mechanically. I like the lore that I believe. Oh, did I already say it's Massive Press is the people that published it, and they created this this wonderful system. I love it. I'm already in love with it. I have read the rule book front to back, We ran the first session, in which I made some mistakes running the NPCs, because there are certain rules that I overlooked.
Everybody does their first time.
That's very important. If you are ever going to Game Master a game, know that everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah, do not let that discourage you. I can't begin to tell you in the amount of time that I've Game Mastered, the amount of times that I've screwed up the rules, that I've honestly unfairly treated my players just because of something that I thought I knew that I didn't know. It's okay, because we're all there to have fun.
That's an idea for an entire episode. We can talk about our
mistakes we've ever made.
Worst mistakes we've ever made.
Yeah, I could talk for hours about that.
I have a couple examples in mind. One involving one of your characters.
Oh God, what do I do now?
All right, so now that we're here, this is session 0 of this podcast, and so what we're going to do now is kind of talk about where we came from. So, Lance, I want you to give me the intro. Your first experience with tabletop gaming, I believe, was Shadowrun, right?
Yep.
One of your buddies back when you were in high school.
This was my freshman year in high school. Somebody that I just met starting in high school. It was kind of a friend of a friend, and he, I don't know that he had ever really Game Mastered Shadowrun before us, but he had the books. It was second edition Shadowrun is where we started. I think he still had some of the old first edition books. As a matter of fact, I think I was the one that inherited all of his books when he stopped playing, because I have totes full of old Shadowrun books at home. And we'd go hang out in his basement, listen to Megadeth, and play, this science fiction, fantasy, cyberpunk genre game. And it, at the time, especially because, this is me, 14 years old probably. This is the coolest thing I'd ever done in my entire life. And I understand that this is, if you've ever, when you start tabletop games, you're basically just rolling dice and using your imagination. And it seems, when you say it out loud, to be such a simple thing. But when you're doing it, it is this prolific experience. And I'll be honest with you, at the time, I don't think any of us had a really good understanding of even really what role-playing games were, because most of us, we were just cranking out these like munchkin characters that were way overpowered and way unrealistic with these minimal, if existent at all, backstories. But that was where it started, and that is what got me into the game, and then, obviously through the course of evolution. Now, I make characters now that I'm less worried about their stats than their actual background and the character themselves.
You do it for the plot.
You do it for the plot. But, however you get started is however you get started. At the end of the day, if it gets you into gaming, that's what's really important. But, yeah, I did that, and we started doing that for a while. And eventually, the onus kind of fell on me to start game mastering, because Jason, the guy that got us into it, he stopped playing. I don't remember the exact circumstances surrounding it. And I kind of started pulling my other friends into the game as we were going along. Some of them had played when Jason was still game mastering. And then, what happens anytime a group loses its game master? Somebody has to fill in that spot, or nobody gets to play. And
right.
Nobody else wanted the job, so I kind of begrudgingly took it. And I did enjoy game mastering while I was doing it, but I will be the first to admit that I probably enjoy playing more than I do GMing. But I think it depends on the setting, and it depends on the group. We did that for a number of years on and off, and I game mastered Shadowrun a lot. And then we eventually got to a point where it was my friend Dan's cousin had gotten us the core rule book for Deadlands, 2nd edition. That's a book by Pinnacle, if anybody's ever played it. And Deadlands is essentially a spaghetti western / horror system. It's a lot of fun. It's a bit of a crunchy system. It goes into a lot of details about things that
It's like if Supernatural, the show, took place in the Old West.
Yeah,
right?
it really is. It's like the supernatural elements and the magic elements are all kind of behind the scenes. Your average townsfolk, they have no idea what that stuff really is, but there's something that's going bump in the night, and there's bodies being found here and there. And that was another one, and I think that I've started game mastering. That was either me or Joe that ended up game mastering that one for a while. I'm going to name drop a lot of my friends. I'm not giving last names, but they'll know who they are if they hear the podcast. Let's see, from there, like Deadlands has a sister game called Hell on Earth, and we did a little bit of that here and there. But it was, from that time, I was, in and out of the Army. I came back home, and eventually, your first game was Hell on Earth with us, wasn't it?
Correct. You were actually not my first game
No,
master.
I think I introduced you to the group. I think I got you into it, but I wasn't the one game mastering. So I'll let Cody tell you about his first experience with gaming.
So this is actually a dual answer because I had I kind of don't count it, but I kind of do. My first real experience with tabletop gaming was, of course, joining your group. With our buddy who wanted to run Deadlands Hell on Earth, which is supernatural, but it takes place in Fallout. And my first experience actually was D&D 3.5, where I made we had put some money together with some other kids at high school, and one guy was he was going to game master it, and we had God, I think there was 8 or 10 of us in my parents' basement for this session, and it was just kind of like a gladiatorial arena where we're running our characters, and I don't know if it was just because there was too many people. I don't think my buddy did a bad job game mastering, but I didn't really enjoy the time I spent doing it, and I never touched it again. So then you cut to 8-9 years later, and I am fresh out of a breakup, and suddenly now my Thursday nights are super wide open. And I hear you guys talking about how much fun you're having.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's saying, oh man, when you shot that bat demon in the head and knocked it over the cliff, I was like, man, this sounds like a lot of fun.
Most of the people that are in our gaming group all used to work together at one point or another, and that's
Yes.
where he used to overhear our conversations about these games, because several of us that were working together were also playing together.
We have a background in a different kind of table game. Well, we worked in a casino for a very long time. I'm still working there part-time, but yeah, so
6.5 years before I escaped.
but yes, so one could say that it was destiny. I've spent my entire adult life in table games.
One way or the other. So some table games better than others.
You guys were starting a Hell on Earth campaign. You were a player. One of our other coworkers was going to be the game master. And I kept hearing about all these awesome stories that you guys were having every week. And suddenly my nights were super free on Thursdays. And so I asked you if you had any room. And of course, you said yes. Which led to me...
That was when we were kind of still hanging out in my sweaty, hot attic.
Yeah.
Finished attic in my old house before I moved.
I didn't really know you guys that well at the time. This is back during my super duper antisocial kind of quiet kid days.
Yeah, we were in training together, but that was about it.
Yeah. And yeah, we were in the same blackjack class.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And but aside from that, we didn't talk a whole lot. But at that point, that was the day the Fire Nation attacked. That was the day my entire life changed when I got invited to this tabletop game. Because I got to... this is what started the whole thing, right? Our lives here now exist because you said yes to that. Who knows how things might have been different.
Honestly, one of the best decisions of my life, because I have not had to shoulder the burden of game mastering constantly, because
I'm
he
sure
likes
you
it.
love that.
I mean,
I
really,
do.
it's not that I don't enjoy game mastering. I legitimately do, but having been the only person in our group that was willing to game master for probably 20 years, that'll beat you down a little bit. You get to a point where you've got all these really neat character ideas, and you don't want to turn them all into NPCs, because then you kind of want to over-glorify them because you've got the God button in front of you.
Yeah, the dreaded unwanted GM PC.
But I mean, even the NPCs that kind of come and go in campaigns, if you try to kind of shoehorn your favorite characters into those, they sometimes come out as a little overworked and overpowered, because you really want to showcase how cool this character would have been if you'd gotten the opportunity to play it. So you kind of overpower them, and that's a bad habit. You shouldn't do it.
I was super afraid of that happening with Talbot, but you guys seem to love him. Anyway.
He sounds like Kermit.
Yes, he kind of sounds like Kermit. I tried to run an NPC sounding like Carl Sagan, and it comes out as Kermit, and I cannot change it. So that's just how it is.
Kermit is canon now. We can't change it. Everybody's decided that's what it is, and we're running with it.
Yeah, that's like coming up with that Pharaoh's name, and you guys just referred to him as Plunger Sound.
Well,
anyway, I got to play, I digress, back into Deadlands Hell on Earth with my very first character, who I named Atticus Smith. And for those who don't know the setting, there is a form of magic in Deadlands Hell on Earth where you can play an arcane background, which is kind of a magic class called a Junker, or they're also referred to in system or in the lore as a techno shaman. Basically, after the apocalypse and all the bombs have dropped, it turns out there were spirits created from these bombs, from the mechanical creations of mankind. So there's different things like gun spirits and auto spirits, and I think like power generator spirits for electricity themed things.
Something like that.
But I liked this class so much, and the entire first session that we ran, I believe we were trying to... we were hired, I want to say, or we were investigating a rundown amusement park, right?
Yep.
Where there were some bad guys that we ended up getting into the first it was a prisoner rescue, right? That they had kidnapped some of the town folks. Some of the town folk, and we were trying to rescue the town folk. And some guy came out behind the scaffolding of the roller coaster and shot my character in his rear, and I spent the entire session rolling on the ground, bleeding and squealing. That is a mechanic where you have to pass like a vigor roll in order to stop being stunned, and I could not pass that check to save my life because I made my character a frickin' wimpy guy. I was playing it, a lot of people play fantasy games so they can, play a different archetype and play, fit into the shoes of a hero that does not that's kind of different than their real personality. And my character, I made a nerd. I was playing a nerd, and I could not pass my vigor check to save my life. And I spent the greater part of 3 hours just on the ground. Our buddy Dan, he didn't, I didn't know Dan so well at the time. He felt so bad for me that in character, he had his character, Scorp, come out and drag me to safety, which was kind of uncharacteristic for Scorp.
It was. To give a little context to that, when you're playing the Deadlands system, and that's either... no, we're not talking about the Deadlands Reloaded system, which was an edition that came out later, but the old Deadlands second edition system.
Deadlands Classic.
And Hell on Earth. When you take damage, you have to make a vigor roll to determine how well your character handles the actual pain of being shot. And if you fail that, your character is incapable of taking most of their actions, and they have to continue to make that roll every action that they have until they pass. He gave his character a very low vigor score and just could not. It was a combination of bad rolling and the fact that he had made his character inherently
kind of wimpy.
Yeah,
because not only was he a wimp, but he wasn't fast, so I didn't get as many actions.
No,
I got maybe 1 or 2 actions
and
around.
They were all spent trying to fumble through that vigor roll.
And so, because initiative is drawn from a deck of cards, right? And so, Dan's over here with like an ace and a king of spades, and I'm sitting there with like a 2 of hearts.
Just waiting to go. Yeah, because it goes from highest card to lowest. To be honest with you, I was surprised that Cody came back for another session. I thought for sure that incident alone would have turned him off to this, which actually surprises me more because I was not aware that he had played 3.5 at any point in time. And he said that he didn't really ever get his teeth into that or care enough about it to pursue role-playing. Nah. And then he had what I would consider one of the worst role-playing experiences that I'd ever seen when he played Hell on Earth, just because of the bleeding and squealing mechanics. And no, he was back the next session, and we kept going, and now we're here hosting a podcast about it.
Yeah, it was like Jumanji. I could hear the drums. Didn't matter how poor my experience was. I could hear the call in the distance. Kept me coming back. From there, I went, we kept doing that weekly, I believe. Mm-hmm. And eventually my character, I learned how to not get eaten alive by monsters and stay out of the main array of combat. Eventually that character kind of evolved into a pretty cool sniper.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right around that time, the campaign ended.
Yeah, well,
we just stopped running it.
I think anybody that's listening to this that has any amount of time in gaming realizes that campaigns tend to blink in and out pretty constantly. And it's unfortunate because a lot of times, for whatever reason, the group will fall apart before you can get to even the best parts of the campaign. And as a GM, I can tell you, I've had plenty of really cool plot lines planned out that just died on the vine because for whatever reason the group couldn't get back together, or the campaign ended, or some other thing occurred that stopped me from utilizing this really neat plot hook or this really neat device or this really neat villain that I had planned out, because he was planned out for mid to late campaign, and the campaign never really got out of its early phases.
But Lance, when one door closes, what happens?
We start a new campaign in another
game, one opens, just like that. And so I believe after that was when I believe it was around the time that Hell on Earth was ending because of our schedule change at work, mm-hmm. probably.
That was usually what was killing our campaigns when we were working there.
I think that was around the time that I decided to step up. I think
so. I think you might have had that 5e book for a while and been thinking about it.
We started Deadlands Classic in the Old West setting before I had the 5e books.
Oh, that's right. You were
Yep.
game mastering Deadlands.
I am.
before
Yeah,
you
that
were-
was my
yeah,
first
'cause
experience.
that's when
Was
I played
like
Roland, wasn't it?
three
Or
or
no, it wasn't Roland. It was
4
Cyrus.
sessions. Yeah, you were playing Cyrus Nash, a wanted outlaw, gunslinger, real typical badass mother MFer on the plains in his duster coat. Which honestly, I got so hyped for that, I designed and printed off like a wanted poster as a prop.
Yeah,
Do
I
you
remember that. Yeah.
I had a little treasure map and everything, and I haven't done as many props lately because just because honestly I'm a little lazy, and technology it helps a lot with
I'm
that.
a little surprised we haven't gotten a prop treasure map for our current campaign.
Well, I did just print I did get you the exploration map,
That's
and
true.
a treasure map will happen. We are currently running a pirate campaign. I can't not have a treasure
yeah,
map.
it's a good segue, actually. Talk about that.
But so we got about 3 or 4 sessions into the Deadlands game. You were playing Cyrus. Dan was playing. He was playing a Apache. I think he was playing.
Yeah,
someone
he
from
was.
that.
He was playing a Native American shaman character.
Yeah. This
War shaman.
He was playing a war shaman. We had to talk about who else was in that group.
Moose was playing.
Oh yeah.
What
I
was
didn't
his
know
name?
that. I couldn't remember.
Vincente. He was the.
He started before Brittany did, though. He brought Brittany in later, I want to say.
Well, that was my campaign that he brought her in. So did we do another Deadlands campaign with like Weird West campaign with me? Yeah, we did. Because you played James.
Yeah, that's right. I was playing James. I was playing James, and then there was Jacob, and then there was me. Mm-hmm. So we were running my Deadlands. You did yours for a while, then I stepped up. But I think we only got 3 or 4 sessions before I could start. I could feel the drums again. True to my core, I love sci-fi and I love fantasy. And the needle, the pendulum swings both ways. Sometimes I'm like, oh, this week I'm gonna read The Expanse, and we're gonna watch Evangelion, and then also more Mass Effect is out now. And then other times it's like, well, let's read eight fantasy novels in a row. And I could feel the call of fantasy. And as a person who is in tabletop games and a nerd, you hear about this game, whether or not you touch it. I don't think there's anyone who hasn't heard of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, if you don't have it. You have to be living under a rock to not at least have heard of it. You may not have played it. You may not even know what a tabletop game is. But culturally, Dungeons and Dragons is so ingrained in...
For better or worse, it's practically the Kleenex of tissues. It's the
it is.
to
I mean,
tabletop games.
D&D is... Like, you can, even if you start talking about table games and people look at you like you're crazy, you're like, it's like Dungeons and Dragons. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yes.
Even if they don't know what that means, they know what Dungeons and Dragons is.
Right. Thank Gygax.
No doubt.
But I ended up getting the core rule books for this. I believe once again I read them all front to back, all 3 of them: Player's Handbook, Game Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. And you were very reluctant at first. You every time I brought it up, you cast a doubtful eye in my direction, because Lance here, they took his beloved Deadlands system and they neutered it with a D20 revamp, right?
Well, that wasn't the whole context of what it was. Okay, I'll be honest, and I was reluctant and I was wrong. I did not like level-based systems.
Okay.
I never liked the concept of a level-based system, because the idea that your character at level 20, like, if he gets shot in the face, like, that's going to be a minimal hit point loss. It's going to be a joke. It's not going to really hurt the character. And that always kind of took it out of me from a reality perspective. Because for those that have played Shadowrun, you understand that a beginning game character can take out a veteran character with a good shot. It's the same way with Deadlands, kind of back to the arcane background system. Deadlands and Shadowrun specifically, they have archetypes rather than classes. So you can make a gunslinger, and you can also give him the blessed arcane background in Deadlands, where now you're going to have to adhere to the strictures of your religion, so your gunslinger's probably not trying to take lethal shots at people. But I mean, you can build a gunslinger that also has some semblance of holy powers or some gifts from God, based on those arcane backgrounds, where a game
as long as you got the bounty points for it.
Where a game like Dungeons and Dragons is a little more strict in the way that the levels, or not the level system, the class system works.
Oh yes.
And I was very reluctant for that when he started talking about D&D. I kind of rolled my eyes, and part of it was that there was an ill-fated, I think it was around 4th edition, they did a Deadlands D20 system based on 4th edition. And honestly, the reviews were crap. I never played it, but I do remember that they started doing dual statted books where they were taking up a lot of space in my Deadlands 2nd edition books with stats for the D20 stuff, and I wasn't super happy about it.
Oh, yeah.
But admittedly, and I will say this, and I will take this to the grave, I was wrong about leveled systems. I was wrong about class systems. Dungeons & Dragons is a blast. Pathfinder is also a class-based system and a level-based system, and it's a blast. You know, that was probably one of the biggest lapses in judgment that I carried for a very long time when it comes to gaming, because I carried that prejudice against level systems from my time starting gaming until you kind of forced me into playing D&D, and I have no regrets about the change.
You know what we should do sometime?
What's that?
We should try and make characters in older editions of D&D and run a game. It'd be like discovering.
Just to see where it all came from?
Yeah, because as much as we love tabletop games, we are not veterans of the older editions of that.
Bring back Thaco.
I've looked into it. It's not as confusing as people say.
Is it? I just assume that that's something nobody wants back.
Yeah, it's very simple. If I explain it, we'll talk about it sometime. That seems like a topic for another day.
Right. So Cody starts game mastering 5th edition.
Yeah, and it is. I am really into it. We're enjoying it a lot. I'm not running. It's in Forgotten Realms, which is a setting that is unfamiliar to me. I'd never read any of the books growing up or anything like that, but there's a lot of resources out there, and that made it easy to homebrew for. We weren't running. I jumped right into it. And I wanted to make my own story. The appeal of creating your own characters and your own adventures is a lot of fun. That's my biggest takeaway as a game master. I get a lot of joy out of doing that. If I was a busier person, I might run a pre-written adventure path or a bound together adventure, but I think that our group has more fun when it's tied more into the characters, and I have more fun when I'm making my own stuff up.
Well, and it's funny because I hadn't realized until I started doing some recent reading how often people base their tabletop games on the written modules. Mm-hmm. Like, I've always kind of ran them. Like, I've always kind of, shoehorned them into my existing campaigns. But there's never been a point in the entire time that I've been gaming where me, as a game master, didn't predominantly produce his own stuff. It had never occurred to me that you could even build entire campaigns out of those splat books. But, I mean, you can. The adventure books for a lot of these systems, there's so many of them that you could build a front-to-back campaign as a GM. If you're not the creative type but you really want a GM, there is the option out there for you to take those existing books and run them.
Oh, yeah. And there might be tweaking involved, but there's the ideas already on paper. So it's like, I want to run Curse of Strahd, but I want to run it 1 to 20, or we're starting at 11. You just got to switch some statistics around. But other than that, primarily the adventure is there for you to take the reins for.
Oh, for sure.
And so basically, we ran D&D 5e, and we did that for 4 years. I think we started in 2017 to 3.5 years.
It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it has. I mean, it's been that long,
and it hasn't. And then we made the switch because, like I've said before, I like me some crunch. And then there was this temptress across the way. It's that meme where the guy's walking with his girlfriend, and there's looking back, and I was walking arm in arm with 5e, and there it was, Pathfinder 2nd edition. And that's what we'll talk about next episode. Why we made the switch and the strengths and weaknesses of both systems. So we're gonna call that a wrap, I think, for session 0. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or recordbuttongroup.com. This is the Game Master Speakeasy, brought to you by the Record Button. You can find us on wherever you're listening to most podcasts, Spotify, and the Apple Store, which I think should be called the Orchard, but that's an entirely different thing. But
Apple, if you do that, you owe us money. I just want to let you know.
No, we don't want to touch that. You can have that for free. Your lawyers are,
that's
stay
right.
away.
Okay, yeah, never mind.
Free advertising, you can have it. Anyway, tell your friends about us. Stick around. We are just here to have a good time and talk about game mastering stuff. And even if you're not a game master, you're still welcome here. Thank you and good night.
Thanks for coming.